you look at the deal that Trump was offering Hamas, it's basically terms of surrender. There's no deal whatsoever. He's saying release all the captives on day one and entrust your fate to the people that genocided you over the past 23 months. German officials told him if Israel bombs Berlin tomorrow, they would have no option but to upload the strike and justify it. Uh, that's the pathetic level they're at. And with that kind of mentality, Israel operates with an impunity imperative that it can do whatever it wants on the shores of Tunisia or Italy or Greece or Spain. They can try to thwart and sabotage vessels trying to bring humanitarian aid into Gaza and get away with it.
Okay, so I'm going to start off soon and then we'll get going. Okay, I'm just going to start a clap.
Perfect.
3, 2, 1. Hi, welcome to another episode of Unapologetic. It's a bit of a different kind of episode of Unapologetic because I'm not in the office, as you can probably see. And it's a bit extraordinary because we're having this episode specifically to speak to Mohammed Shehada about Israel's actions in Doha, where they struck a Hamas leadership meeting. But not just that, there's claims from the flotilla mission that they've struck the flotilla mission in Tunis, the lead boat that had Greta Thunberg on. And also, they've ordered the evacuation order. They've ordered Gaza City to be evacuated with imminent ground invasion, which many commentators see as an imminent ethnic cleansing. Muhammad, welcome to the show once again.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for making your time available. I understand you're at a conference in Italy to discuss Gaza Gulf relations, so it's an imminent kind of time that this has occurred. Muhammad, just first off, how are these three things connected in your opinion?
Well, the thread connecting all of them is that Netanyahu has one solution to the Gaza Strip, which is erasing Gaza completely, finishing off the Palestinian question militarily, and doing whatever it takes to get there. In Gaza City, it's the largest urban space left in the entire Gaza Strip that Israel has not razed completely to the ground, flattened neighborhood by neighborhood, like they did in Rafah, Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, Jabalia, etc. And that's why they want to go there with bulldozers and leave nothing standing so that Gaza is completely uninhabitable. And the only logical conclusion for people there would be to leave and run for their lives. Basically, the exact same message that Netanyahu is making. And at the same time, you have Israel doing two things: preventing any international actors from coming to the rescue of Gazans, or even providing something as little as food or medicine or water or baby formula. And Israel is saying to activists that they will stop at nothing. No one is going to prevent them from thwarting any flotilla or any attempt to cross into Gaza to aid the population there from starvation or death by diseases or death by Israeli bombardments and the inflicted wounds that are resulted by these massacres. And the third track is Israel killing any diplomatic pathway to saving Gaza. So they want to kill Gaza physically on the ground, and they want to prevent people from saving Gaza physically, and they want to prevent people from saving Gaza on the negotiating table. And that's precisely what Netanyahu just did in Qatar by bombing Doha, while Hamas's leadership was there to negotiate and deliberate amongst themselves the very proposal that Trump just gave them 2 days ago for a ceasefire and a prisoner swap. So Netanyahu is saying two things. He does not care whatsoever about the remaining Israeli captives in Gaza. He considers all of them dead, and they're basically a nuisance or a stumbling block, a hurdle in his path to the genocide, and he wants to ensure that that hurdle is removed. And number two, he's saying that no answer is there whatsoever to stop the genocide. There's nothing Hamas or Palestinians or the international community can do to persuade Israel to take its hands off the trigger, except for outright pressure on the Israelis, which means suspending the bombs, suspending the aid, suspending the complicity of European and Western governments with Tel Aviv.
Mohammed, you mentioned that senior Hamas leadership were there. Among them was Khalid Mishal, Khalil Haya. There's no confirmation that any of them have been killed. The Israelis did claim early on that they may have killed Khalil Haya, but that's now been confirmed. Palestinian sources have confirmed that it's Himam al Haya who has been killed. That's Khalil Haya's son, and Jihad Lubad, who is the office manager of the office. Just you mentioned that they were there to discuss Trump's proposal. That's highly speculated. That all likelihood that's what they were doing. Do you have information, any other information to ascertain that's definitely what they were discussing?
Absolutely. I was just in Istanbul and traveled from there yesterday in the afternoon. And the day before, Hamas's leadership in Turkey left to Doha to negotiate the Trump proposal and try to articulate a counter answer to it. Uh, Basically, Doha has become the hub for Hamas's leadership from all around the world to converge there whenever Israel and the US ask Qatar specifically to get an answer from Hamas. Because up until today, this afternoon, Qatar was one of the two places where it was known for certain that Israel would not even think about targeting Hamas there. Because Hamas is there in the first place based on an Israeli American request. The other place is Egypt. So now Netanyahu is saying that he will stop at nothing to destroy the slightest chance of Hamas coming and waging what Israel refers to as a peace offensive when Palestinians become too moderate, when Palestinians rise to international respectability or accept international proposals, that Israel runs out of excuses to not negotiate, to not compromise, to not end the genocide or the occupation. Israel deems this a major threat, and you saw it with many precedents historically, where Israel's answer to this is to go in with a sledgehammer and bomb or kill or assassinate the Palestinian leadership until hardliners take over again. And that's the image that Israel would be happy with.
Yeah, I mean, Netanyahu tweeted shortly after the attack. He said, "Today's action against the top terrorist chieftains of Hamas was a wholly independent Israeli operation. Israel initiated, Israel conducted it, and Israel takes full responsibility." Now, I mean, you've said, and it seems very likely, in all likelihood, they were discussing Trump's proposal. Trump obviously wants to be seen as a person who's, I mean, from his egotistic perspective only, he's bringing sort of peace and ending the ceasefire. I mean, do you think that there's also reports, and both the US have admitted and the Qataris have admitted that the US were notified shortly before the attack. So what's going on here? What kind of game is this? Do you think this is once again potentially Netanyahu kind of dragging the US along, or do you think there was a green light from the USA?
Well, basically, up until now, you have a clear U.S. policy consistent from the Biden administration until today of giving Israel an absolute green light, a free hand to do whatever it wants, with the U.S. only asking for one thing in return: to be notified sometimes, not always, but sometimes, when Israel is about to blow off another taboo or red line, like we see today. When Israel assassinated Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, they did not inform the US until the last minute before it happened. That's what Israel itself later revealed. The Israeli defense minister at the time, Yoav Gallant. It is likely that they did the same here, but it's practically impossible that the US did not know about the Israeli attack on Doha in advance. They can easily monitor the movement of Israeli fighter jets. They can see it with satellite imagery. They can intercept signals coming out of Israel or other countries around the area that are very close allies of Washington. So Washington knew for sure. The problem is basically now you have a Trump White House that has broken any traditional politics whatsoever. And basically, they think that they are reinventing the wheel. They can do politics in whatever way they deem fit without any regard to red lines or diplomatic procedures or decorum or any of it. Um, on the other side, what you're seeing is basically Netanyahu playing Trump for a sucker. He thinks that he can get away with a lot. At the same time, Bibi, Israeli media makes it very crystal clear that Bibi is terrified of Trump. It's not a relationship of love or hate, but it's basically Netanyahu is constantly testing boundaries and limits. How much can he get away with? So you saw it on play in January. As soon as Trump walks into office, Netanyahu accepts the ceasefire deal that's been on the table for over a year, and Israel never said yes to it. So it was a gesture sort of to be on Trump's good side. But Netanyahu quickly realized that there's so much slack that Trump was willing to cut for him. And that's what you see on display with Israel in an opening strike in collapsing the ceasefire. They bombed Hamas's entire negotiating team in the Gaza Strip. Assam Da'alis, the acting prime minister, Abu Ubaid al-Jmasi, the acting head of the emergency committee, Salah Bardawil, a member of the political bureau of Hamas in Gaza, and Ismail Barhoum, the one also a member of the political bureau. You saw it also in July last year when Haniyeh was very close to finalizing a deal. Literally, Haniyeh had accepted Biden's proposal, and Israel decided to take him out in Tehran immediately. They didn't leave any room for possibilities. And you're seeing it again now. It's merely policy consistency that Netanyahu does not want a ceasefire to happen, but he's using the negotiations as cover, as narrative management. Israel keeps telling Western allies that don't pressure us into ending the genocide because there is a ceasefire right around the corners. There's basically negotiations happening, and the ceasefire can happen at any minute. And they kept telling Western allies that if you criticize Israel's genocide in Gaza in the slightest and most mild language, it would empower Hamas and make them more hardline in the negotiations. Therefore, tune it down, keep it a secret until we get a ceasefire deal done. But now Netanyahu decided to blow up that theater play completely, which only leaves his accomplices completely embarrassed in front of their constituencies.
Now, I mean, the Israelis have responded in Western media, also writing to this, that Israel says that this is in response to the attack that happened inside Israel, where 6 Israelis were killed. Which what's your response to that?
The Hamas leadership in Doha have practically zero impact, influence, or connection to any military operations on the ground in Gaza or in the West Bank. They are basically the politicians, the negotiators, and that's why they have an office in Doha in the first place. The U.S. and Israel, again, they are the ones that asked Doha to keep them there. Qatar, they in November last year, I was there at the time. They politely and quietly asked Hamas to leave because they expected intense pressure from the Trump administration, and they suspended Hamas's office in Doha. But within a matter of weeks, the entire Hamas leadership was invited to Doha again because Trump and his team asked Qatar to host them once more. So Qatar basically allowed the political wing of the movement, not the military wing. And the political wing there represents the pragmatic, moderate chapter in Hamas's political office. The hardline leaders are rarely there. I don't think they're there in the first place. So basically, if Khalil al Hayya was assassinated today, until now we hear that it's only his son, likely his spouse, and his office manager that were killed. But even if Khalil al Hayya was killed and the entire leadership in Doha, it would have practically zero impact on Hamas's maintaining a long-term insurgency inside Gaza itself. It would have zero impact on the military operations of Hamas, either in Gaza or in the West Bank. So it's basically a victory image. That's number one. But more importantly, it's Netanyahu's surefire recipe for collapsing the remotest possibility of a ceasefire taking hold in Gaza. If you look at the deal that Trump was offering Hamas, it's basically terms of surrender. There's no deal whatsoever. He's saying release all the captives on day one and entrust your fate to the people that genocided you over the past 23 months. Entrust your lives and your family's lives to the American White House, to the American administration that literally asked Hamas to release an Israeli American soldier a few months ago, Aidan Alexander, unrequitedly, unilaterally, for nothing in return. And at the time, Steve Witkoff, Trump's negotiator, he promised Hamas that if they did so, it would go a very long way with Trump, and Trump would call for an end to the genocide and resumption of humanitarian aid going into Gaza. As soon as Aidan Alexander was released, the U.S. did absolutely nothing. They pretended that there was no agreement with Hamas in the first place. So they are now saying, trust your fate to us, the people that scammed you the first time. Trust that we will be kind on you the second time with a verbal promise, not even a written agreement. But you basically have a Hamas leadership that have gone far and wide in terms of compromising and trying to get a deal with the testimonies of people like Shara Bahbah, the American Palestinian negotiator that was negotiating on behalf of Trump and Witkoff. And with that leadership, they tried everything possible to make sure there is an end to the genocide in Gaza. But Netanyahu is not interested in the talks in the first place. The talks are a mere cover to continue the genocide with minimal international opposition.
Mohammed, no, I think most people looking at this, I mean, outside of the fact of Israel's appalling, cruel, ghastly behavior that they've done in Gaza in the last 23 months, I think what also kind of is shocking to them is the continuous sort of, Israel is behaving with absolutely no boundaries. It's attacking other states. It's done this a few times, and also it seems to be consistently annoying the U.S. president, right? First Biden and now Donald Trump. There was that moment just after the U.S. actually retaliated against Iran on behalf of Israel, where it was the moment in the lawn where you see Donald Trump actually, to reporters, actually use a few cuss words when speaking about Netanyahu. So there's clear frustrations. And you've also alluded to the fact that, Netanyahu tries to get away with what he can. make it make sense to us, because we look at this and we think, how is this humanly possible? How is it that Netanyahu is able to drag Trump along as much as he wants? Not that I don't think Trump has any sort of altruistic motives at all. Don't get me wrong, but how is this possible?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just Trump. Israel is dragging the entire West with it and the entire international order, the rule based order, so called. And you see European governments applauding it. It was absolutely insane when Israel bombed Iran unprovoked, and then Europe came out to condemn Iran for being bombed by Israel. At that point, I was in Berlin, so I asked a few German diplomats and officials and members of parliament, etc., civil society, why did they say absolutely nothing to condemn the Israeli attack on Tehran when Berlin was a stronghold of opposition to the US invasion of Iraq? And the answer I got from the Germans unanimously was basically saying that it's because Israel is the one that did it. If the US was the one that bombed Iran, we would have had a much easier time to condemn the US than condemning Israel. Another friend of mine, an interlocutor who spoke to German officials at the time, told me that German officials told him if Israel bombs Berlin tomorrow, they would have no option but to applaud the strike and justify it. Uh, that's the pathetic level they're at. And with that kind of mentality, Israel operates with an impunity imperative that it can do whatever it wants on the shores of Tunisia or Italy or Greece or Spain. They can try to thwart and sabotage vessels trying to bring humanitarian aid into Gaza and get away with it. The sky is the limit when you see that kind of behavior. And it's the same behavior that came out of apartheid South Africa in its final years. So apartheid South Africa, when it had gone completely lunatic, they bombed and attacked Angola, Namibia, Mozambique, Lesotho, Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Swaziland, and others. And you have basically Israel now at a point where they attack Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, the West Bank, Qatar, Iran, Yemen, Tunisia, etc. There's no end in sight because they operate with an impunity imperative. But that impunity imperative, the more lunatic they would go, the more difficult it would be for their accomplices to whitewash what Israel is doing. The other signal that Israel got to encourage it to carry out this attack is basically Trump blacklisting and terror designating, imposing the harshest sanctions possible on three of the top Palestinian human rights organizations that have been long funded by the US and Europe combined. Al Haq, Al Mizan, and the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. And you did not see a single condemnation or even a statement of concern from a single European leader or any Western leader whatsoever. None. The sanctions imposed, sanctioning these organizations into oblivion, and no response. The way the dynamics go between Trump and Netanyahu, Trump knows that Netanyahu is testing the limits, is making a fool out of him, but he doesn't want to admit so. He wants to always pretend that it's all about the game within the game, that he's outsmarting everyone. He knows that Netanyahu is manipulating him. We saw it in the first term after Trump left office when he was interviewed by Barack Ravid, and he said that he cursed basically Netanyahu outright. And you saw it basically around the time that Trump was coming back into office. Israeli media and Israeli officials were having a meltdown. They were not particularly only enthusiastic about his return. They were concerned. They were saying that with Biden, he's predictable. We can expect his next move always. We know how to influence. But with Trump, it changes every hour. So how are we going to survive if we do this and he doesn't like it? How are we going to survive if we do that and he doesn't like it? But the way that Israel knows it can get away with much with Trump is they know Trump listens always to the last person in the room. So if you overstaff his office, just overstuff it with people that are very pro-Israeli or Israeli lobbyists, you would know for certain that Trump would always have the Israeli message in his head. One example to conclude with: when Trump visited Beit Lahem in 2018 and met with the Palestinian president Mahmoud Abbas, at that point Netanyahu had told him that Abbas is a terrorist, is a hardliner, is an advocate of armed violence against Israel, and that Abbas is arming, facilitating, and supporting terrorist activities against Israel. That was Netanyahu's charge. Trump met with Abbas, and Abbas basically gave up much of the tenets of what makes the Palestinian cause. He said the question of the refugees, we will only accept a symbolic return. Israeli settlers can stay in most of the areas that they're staying in the West Bank with land swaps in return. The settlements blocks, I don't want to dismantle it. I will have a disarmed, demilitarized state. I want to have NATO on the borders between us and Jordan to give Israel security assurances. I want to have the US military on the ground. And he basically compromised immediately everything to Trump. And Trump was very impressed, and he looked at Abbas, and he said, they told me that you're a terrorist. They told me that you're a terrible man. But it turns out that it's the opposite. And he's saying, I think we have a deal. And Abbas, he looks around the table and he says to his advisors, his staff, I think we solved the conflict, guys. I think we've got a state. And Trump jokingly says to Abbas, he says, when you get to the land swap part of the negotiations, call me, because I worked in real estate much of my life. So I know how to pick up a good piece of land for you. I'm going to help you with this. And he leaves. As soon as he left, Jared Kushner went back into the room and he pulled Saib Uraiqat, the Palestinian chief negotiator, aside, and he told him, forget everything POTUS told you. You deal with me now. None of what Trump said matters. And that's the way that business goes as usual between Netanyahu and Trump. He knows that the most he can get out of the White House, if he breaks every red line, is a couple of statements of Trump just going off the records or off the rail or whatever and cursing Israel. And then he will fix it again. He will get Miriam Edelson or any of the philanthropists, any of the mega billionaires that donated to Trump's campaign to sweet talk him into complicity again and submission.
Mohammed Shehada, thank you so much for your time. That was a very interesting and needed analysis. And once again, we hope to see you on the show at some time in the future. And best of luck with everything you're trying to achieve there in Italy.
Thanks so much for having me. It's
Thanks,
good to
Mohammed.
talk to you always. Thank you.